Hello, everyone. So we are delighted to welcome you today to this conference to discuss the economy during the Neolithic, Bronze Age, and Iron Age. This is not a new question, as you know, and we already find it in the earlier study of this period. It was the subject that Joseph Dechlet himself took particularly to Earth. And so late prehistory was a pivotal period marked by major developments in social and economic structures. And we are witnesses increasing sedentarization, followed by the first attempt to art urbanization, the transition to resource exploitation models that generated surpluses, long-distance trade, the rise of metallurgy, and the emergence of monetary systems. So it's a very important period. But if in recent years we have seen an increase in the number of excavations and the democratization of new methods of analysis, particularly in terms of chemical composition and isotopic studies, the question of contacts between late prehistoric population and the Nearbu is, also, the question of contacts between late prehistoric population and their neighbor is a particularly important one, especially as it resonates with very real current societal issues. And we have probably never before collated and manipulated such large sets of data that we can shed light on questions about the economy. However, it is interesting to note that archaeologists working on this period have recently been somewhat less interested in the real conceptual developments surrounding economic issues. So this paradox raises a number of questions that we will now explore during these 2 days of conference. We began yesterday with the conference of Christophe and the debate that followed. So there are many definitions of what is economy, but for our purpose, we will retain a fairly large one, general version that it is the conditions and forms of productions and exchange, as well as the ways in which the resulting products are distributed. We will also examine how these questions vary according to geographical areas, chronologies, and schools of thought. By way of introduction with Marilou and Eneko, we are going to give you a brief overview of our thoughts on the subject based on our respective specialties and mainly applicable to French research.
The Bronze Age is now widely recognized as a period of significant increase in exchanges. This interconnectedness was largely driven by the new need for resources to metallurgy. The supply of metallic resources, particularly gold, copper, and tin, which are unevenly distributed across Europe, has become a focal point in discussions about the economy of this period. The acquisition and distribution of these resources, whether in the form of ores, ingots, semi-finished or finished products, emerged as a crucial issue for societies. According to this scenario, an elite class began to rise, gaining control over the networks of metallurgical goods. The earliest metal objects, such as those made from copper and hammered gold, serve as indicators of these interconnected elites. However, they initially appear to reflect neither significant technological advancements nor substantial socio-economic transformations. It was with the advent of mold casting and increased production that a true metallurgical revolution occurred. This period was characterized by significant technical innovations including the widespread use of copper alloyed with tin and the lost wax casting technique, alongside profound socio-economic and cultural shifts. These changes led to a major restructuring of trade networks, contrasting sharply with those established at the end of the Neolithic, such as the trade of dolerite from Brittany, Alpine jades, and Grand Pressigny flints, for example. The middle of the second millennium BC heralded the emergence of a deeply interconnected world on a continental scale, where metallurgy acted both as a catalyst and a key to understanding these dynamics. Current research increasingly posits that metallurgy was a primary motivation for Bronze Age communities to forge connections, suggesting that it played a crucial role in a form of early globalization. Helle van Kilde even introduced the term bronzization to describe this process, likening it to a multiscalar globalization driven by a collective desire for bronze and sustained through numerous interconnecting activities. The Bronze Age economy is often viewed as comprising two distinct spheres, and we talked about this point yesterday. One featuring the ordinary exchange of everyday goods on a local scale, such as ceramics, cereals, livestock, and so on. And the other encompassing luxury goods like metals, amber, salts, glass, and so on. That linked Eurasia and the Near East. Surrounding these two spheres are the perishable or recycled materials that elude our analysis almost entirely. The prominence of metal in archaeological records position it as the primary medium for examining the economic mechanisms of the Bronze Age, particularly through the practice of hoarding. Between the 5th and the 8th century BC, numerous tons of bronze were buried or submerged across Europe, often without a clear connection to funerary practices. This phenomenon highlights a limitation of archaeology in grappling with the materiality or immateriality of past actions. It's essential to acknowledge that there may have been alternative forms of exchange that left no tangible evidence, and this creates a bias in our understanding due to the hypervisibility of metal in the archaeological record.
I forgot my notes. Bad organizer. For the following periods, and essentially the late Bronze Age and the early Iron Age, a different concept took center stage. This is the hypothesis that money, before taking the form we know today is a coin, went through several stages of development and standardization, in particular through the gradual standardization of certain quantities of metal. This is not a new question. It was raised as early as the 19th century BC. The first identified mention of the subject seems to come from Félicien de Saulcy in 1836, who believed that Rouelle, bronze wheels, prefigured future coins and that they were already being used as a means of payment. In particular, he noted that among certain Gauls people, the wheel symbol remained on later coins. This idea was taken up by other researchers, notably Widrange, who suggested that the wheel were structured by weight. At the end of the 19th century, discoveries of arts like dwellings continued this development. Dezor even proposed the identification of coin purses, the porte-monnaie protohistorique, in the clusters of rings found at sites such Auvergne. However, this hypothesis did not meet with consensus at the time and were strongly criticized. for example by Alfred Morel Fatio, but this did not put an end at the idea. In 1888, a new step was taken when Jules Pilloy proposed that the fragmented bronze found in deposits in hoards had been intentionally cut to obtain uniform weights, which could have made in a primitive form of money. These ideas were synthesized and extended by Jules-Adrien Blanchet and Joseph Deschlet at the end of the 19th and beginning of the 20th century, century AD, of course. But after the First World War and Deschlet's death, in particular, the issue somewhat disappeared from archaeological considerations, at least in France. And in France, it was only at the end of the 20th century BC that the idea really resurfaced with the work of Jacques Briard on armorican axes, or from the early Iron Age. Briard introduced the concept of paléomoney, suggesting an evolutionary process that anticipated minted money. At the same time, a number of researchers from across Europe have pursued the same line of thought. Sommerfeld, for example, conducted an exhaustive study of the monetary uses of metal objects in the Bronze Age in 1994, focusing on the sickles deposit of northern Central Europe. In 1995, Lenners de Wild proposed a complete model for the development of monetary objects in Central Europe, describing their evolution from torques used solely as ornaments to their standardization as currency. And several researchers, such as Peroni or Primas, have also explored the identification of weight standards in these monetary objects, highlighting the weight of standardization of gold rings and spirals found in the Balkans. Today, the question of late prehistoric money is still at the heart of research, with new quantitative approaches and increasingly large bodies of data. The work of Nicola Yalongo, Giancarlo Lago, Kucher and Popa underlines the importance of metrology in this field. However, there is still a need for more in-depth study of the periods preceding the introduction of minted coins, and particularly the Iron Age.
Now we will take a closer look at the revolution, if ever there was one, of the introduction of coinage in temperate Europe. The introduction of coinage among the Celts in the 3rd century BC was a part of a larger process of interaction with Mediterranean civilizations. Even though this came later than in Greece, it marked a gradual shift toward a monetarized economy. This transformation shows how both external influences and internal changes shaped the use of coins in Celtic societies. So let's start by the first point, looking at the Mediterranean influences and early Celtic coins. The first Celtic coins were heavily influenced by Greek and Macedonian coins, especially those of Philip II of Macedon and Alexander the Greek. These coins spread over Gaul, Central Europe, and the Iberian Peninsula, showing how trade and culture connected the Celts to the Mediterranean. In northern Gaul, so you have the map there, they copied Philip II gold statters, while in the south, they imitated Greek drachmas from the cities like Emporion and Roda in actual Catalonia. In Central Europe, they copied silver tetradrachms of Philip II and statters of Alexander. But these Mediterranean influences were only one part of the story. Local traditions and social structures also played a key role in how the Celts created and used their own coins. At first, Celtic coins were not used for everyday trade. Instead, they were prestige objects or social tools used by elites in special contexts like marriage, rites of passage, or as diplomatic gifts. They also helped elites finance military campaigns or maintain political alliances. Coins were a way for the Celtic aristocracy to reinforce their power and prestige. Much like building sanctuaries, striking coins was a way for elites to reinvent themselves and sustain their dominance in ever-changing world. So let's consider the parallel possibility that Celtic societies took the first steps toward a monetarized economy. Also, coins were initially limited to elites. By the mid-3rd century BC, they started being used more widely in certain settlements. These were often unfortified centers or open agglomerations of craft productions and trade, like Roseldorf in Austria, Niemczyce in Czech Republic, or Lacoste in Gaul. At this site, so the map here on the left, hundreds or even thousands of coins have been found, showing that coinage was becoming more common in local exchanges. There were even smaller denominations, little silver or gold fractions, suggesting a certain sophistication and a more developed economy, monetary economy system. Here on the right, you have an image that compares the size of these little Celtic fractions with one 1 cent coin on the right. So I will let you imagine. These settlements played a key role in spreading coin use and organizing trade. They became hubs of monetarization. However, outside these centers, coins were still very rare. Most people continued to trade using traditional methods like credit, gift, and countergifts. Celtic society wasn't based on barter, as some romantic views suggest. Instead, it relied on credit and interpersonal relationships. These modalities ensure the continuity and the cohesion of existing hierarchies and social models. When coins were introduced in the 3rd century BC, they didn't cause an economic or social revolution. Coin coexisted with all the forms of exchange and mainly helped primarily to maintain social order and to reinforce the power of the elites. The coexistence of these two economic systems, one based on credit and the other on coinage, persisted for several centuries. The monetarization of exchange was a slow and gradual process that first affected some open settlements, open agglomerations, before later extending on broader Celtic communities. In conclusion, the introduction of coinage among the Celts was not a sudden change, but a slow evolution, far from representing a rupture. The appearance of coinage is part of a continuum of practices and customs, reflecting a gradual transformation of Celtic societies. Coins became part of existing social and economic structure, helping the Celts move toward a market economy while still preserving traditional ways based on prestige and personal relationships.
So during the next 2 days, we will explore and discuss several aspects of these proto-historic economies. The program we produced will gather oral papers based mostly on thematic approaches and somewhat confronting different conceptual visions or cultural aspects. Each block will be followed by a discussion slot. And we will begin with the question of contacts in regions sometimes considered as peripheral, even it shouldn't be, with the presentation of Len Melheim, then Carlo Bottaini and Raquel Villaça, followed by a coffee break. Then we had some last-minute cancellations, unfortunately, so Julien Zurbach and Nicolas Yalongo apologized. They had to cancel at the very last minute, both for personal issues. So we will follow directly with the presentation of Lorenz Ramstorff and Sophie Schaaf-d'Artoine, where they will explore some exchange modalities. Then we will have another slot of discussion and a lunch. You are all invited to a restaurant. We can say that for sure now. And in the afternoon, we'll have 3 papers dealing with reflection on large economic practices, dealing with various natural resources with Anne-Brice Berth, Pierre-Yves Milsan, and Laurent Olivier. And after that, we will have a short break, and we will have a tour of the museum collection for who want to see them. So it won't be tomorrow, but today. Tomorrow we will continue with institutional approaches, but for later periods with Alexis Gorg and Alain Bresson. And after the morning break, Elon Emmans and Sylvia Nieto-Pelletier will present 2 different reflections concerning monetary questions. And after the lunch break, we will have our last block of papers dealing especially with production and trade and the resulting interaction with Corso Dominici, Maria Cecilia D'Ercole, and Pascual Perdiguero and Feliciana Sale. We will then close this conference with a last time dedicated to discussion and debate. That will be followed by maybe another tour of the museum, but without guides. I don't know where we are, if it's maintained or not. Before we begin, I remind you that this conference is recorded and that the video will be available on the museum website by the end of the year, I think. And the proceeding of this conference will be also published. We'll be reminding you of this in the coming weeks, but you can already take note that we will be expecting your paper for the 1st of April, and it's not a joke. So 1st of April 2025, we will expect your papers. I don't know if I forget something, I don't think so. So that being said, we welcome you to this conference. We thank you for your presence, and we wish you an excellent conference. Thank you. So we have 3-4 minutes if you have a question about this very brief introduction. Okay, there is one.
Yeah, thank you very much for this very interesting introduction. Just have a question for Neko. It was really interesting, your short overview of the developments. I just wonder, what is the evidence that the Celtic Society exchanges was mainly built on credits, on credit? Is it written evidence from later period, or?
Can I answer in French? Is a problem for you? Okay, sorry. So we don't have any evidences because le problème du crédit, c'est qu'évidemment, il ne laisse pas de traces matérielles. Et donc, le grand problème, et ça a été évoqué hier évidemment par Christophe Darmanjas, c'est que nous, archéologues, on est un peu prisonniers par cette matérialité de vestiges. Et il faut aussi songer que la grande majorité des échanges peuvent obéir à des choses qui n'ont pas laissé de traces matérielles dans ce que nous pouvons lire. Et donc c'est exactement, ça fait écho, je pense, à ce qui nous a été dit hier, l'importance que peuvent avoir les clés de lecture fournies par l'ethnologie ou pour l'anthropologie pour essayer de proposer certaines grilles de lecture qui sont applicables à nos sociétés. Donc évidemment, moi je fais qu'emprunter certaines grilles de lecture qui ont été proposées par plusieurs anthropologues, plusieurs ethnologues, notamment aussi tous les débats qu'il y a eu autour du troc, donc Barthes et tout ce qui a été mis en cause, notamment par Jean-Michel Servet, sur la fable du troc, des idées qui ont été reprises ensuite par David Graeber notamment et d'autres, où l'on voit bien que ce ne sont pas des modalités qui peuvent s'appliquer à des sociétés comme celles que l'on peut étudier, des échanges qui seraient basés sur du troc, mais plutôt sur du don contre don ou du crédit, des choses qui permettent d'avoir une relation interpersonnelle forte et qui renforcent la cohésion de certaines sociétés et qui sont des choses qui ont bien été documentées sur des parallèles plutôt ethnologiques, anthropologiques. Nous, on est prisonniers par la matérialité, mais il faut essayer de s'émanciper un petit peu de cette prison qui nous enveloppe.